and James were honestly surprised. The Flying Scotsman was a few meters away from us. He was talking to Gordon. Gordon was on about something, but then he decided to leave. Me and James decided to go up to the Flying Scotsman. Him and James were talking for hours. The Flying Scotsman had the same names and badges as Gordon did. We were talking to him when he said he wasn't going to move for at least a few more hours, so me and James decided to leave. That's when he stopped. James reversed and I asked him what's he doing. He then asked the Flying Scotsman if he knew if Thomas was alright. The Flying Scotsman wondered why. We told the Flying Scotsman that Thomas had an accident and we decided to leave. We left the Flying Scotsman wondering because we didn't know if he was working for the Empire or not. That's when we remembered that Annie and Clarabelle were in the shed and we can use them for the rebels whenever an evacuation plan needed to be done. So we went back to the shed, but Annie and Clarabelle were gone. I was honestly confused until James looked at the crane where Thomas had his crash. Thomas was gone, but all that was left of him was blood from the breakdown train from when he ran into it. James decided to leave since no one was there. We went down stations and platforms. We went down a bend and then all of a sudden, Gordon was chasing after us. He had the same guns as Thomas did. James went as fast as he could, but he had to pick up speed. Gordon shot down a bend and raced down the line. James all of a sudden bolted. Gordon ran after him. We went past stations, platforms, signals. Gordon was telling everyone to get down. He was shooting his gun. Gordon was going as fast as he could. James was pumping his pistons faster than ever before. They were once neck and neck. Gordon and James were arguing about what was right and what was wrong. Gordon eventually raced off, trying to catch up to James, after James had sped off. James had gone past the points. Then, Gordon went on our line. Gordon tried to come up on our line and ran into the back of James, shooting his tender. We went past a set of points, hoping the signalman would change them. He did, for an engine that we didn't see. We were hoping it's someone we knew. Gordon stopped. And then it was the Flying Scotsman. He helped us. He shouted for me and James to keep going and don't look back. Gordon was cussing and telling the Flying Scotsman he would kill him. James thanked the Flying Scotsman and sped off. When me and James had a bit of peace, we found a shed. We decided to rest there for a couple of days until we could make a plan. James was honestly breathing heavily. The stress had taken him over. I told James that what the hell happened. James was talking about Flying Scotsman's sacrifice and reminded him of Henry, and this was the story that James told. Henry used to pull passenger trains with the Empire. He was usually pulling soldiers or goods that he didn't know what was in them. One day, Henry had enough. He was puffing down the line with a train that he didn't know what had in it. Eventually, Henry just stopped, uncoupled his train and just left it there. He puffed off in an instant, making sure that the Empire wouldn't find him. He went as far as he could. Eventually, Henry found the rebel base, but unfortunately the Empire found out about Henry's betrayal. They sent some of their best men to find him. Gordon was one of them. It wasn't long until the resistance told Henry about the Empire knowing about his betrayal. Henry told Benny to protect his red coach at all costs. Benny agreed, and with that, Henry left to keep the rebel base safe. Henry sped down the main line as fast as he could to make sure that no one would find the rebel base. He switched points to rest for a bit, but then he heard a whistle. It was Gordon. He came speeding down the line, and then all of a sudden, it was night when Henry woke up. He was off the rails and he was missing his tender. That's when two men came up to Henry. They were cutting him and burning him and throwing matches at him until one put a grenade in his boiler. I was honestly sick. James was telling me about how the Empire do this to show what happens when you betray the Empire. I honestly didn't know what to do. James said we should wait here until we have a plan and to save the Flying Scotsman.